G'day guys, and today we're back again chatting about coronavirus in Australia. Now I was going to do what I usually did and have sort of a generalist video, a general update on the state of the nation and this sort of thing, but we got to talk about this Ruby Princess cruise ship that has been allowed to dock in Australia not once but twice, and it's something that really deserves its own video. So getting straight into it, I'm going to give you a sort of timeline relating to this ship. So we'll be reading from The Guardian first up. So back on the 8th of March, the Ruby Princess docked in Sydney for the first time. According to the ship's internal logs, 158 passengers on board were sick, with 13 registering high temperatures. Just by the by, cruise ships are really interesting. They do have a lot of sophisticated medical apparatus on board, including freezers for dead bodies and doctors, because often they serve as sort of mobile retirement villages and this sort of thing. So yes, according to the ship's logs, 158 passengers were sick, 13 registering high temperatures. 9 were tested upon arrival, according to The Australian, which is a newspaper. However, despite this, all passengers were allowed to disembark, including a Northern Territory couple who later flew to Darwin and tested positive for COVID-19. So they were able to spread the disease from New South Wales to the Northern Territory, which is not great. So despite all this, despite the fact that there were so many sick passengers on board, despite the fact that we have this case study from that ship in Tokyo, that the fact that this disease spreads like wildfire in these ships, because cruise ships tend to share air circulates between rooms. So even if you sort of self-isolate, you're breathing and you're sneezing, the air, picks up, circles around, and this sort of thing, which is what we saw in Japan. Despite all this, the ship was only rated medium risk by New South Wales health authorities. So hours later, 2,700 new passengers boarded the ship in Sydney and set sail that night for another return trip to New Zealand. So the next couple of days, I believe it was 11 days, the Ruby Princess sailed to New Zealand back, docking in 2 different places. We have Eliza McCafferty, a name I'm sure I'm butchering, a passenger on the ship, telling The Guardian Australia that people were told to fill in a form declaring if they had a cough or fever, but at no point did the Ruby Princess inform passengers that there were suspected cases of coronavirus on board. Because obviously they're logging things in the ship and they're saying, look, all these people are sick, we're going through this massive worldwide pandemic. Maybe there's coronavirus, but apparently that was something that they neglected to tell the passengers. So the ship sails around New Zealand, comes back on March 19th, and once again docks in Sydney for the second time. Again, it's allowed to dock. I mean, you think we're getting to the point in March when we've wrapped up lockdown responses that maybe, telling ships to wait offshore for a little bit, maybe send some doctors out to do some testing and that sort of thing, but no. Just let them dock and just let what be happens. Even worse, this ship was docked down to a low risk level by New South Wales health authorities, as it had only been travelling between New Zealand and Australia. Now again, it's not like you're travelling to Europe or China, where it would of course be a much higher risk of people jumping on board and getting infected, but still, this ship's just allowed to dock and it's classified as low risk, and all 2,700 passengers were allowed to disembark. There was no testing, there was no temperature gunning, there was nothing. As McCafferty says, quote, "At no point was anybody checked. As we were disembarking, they basically just scanned us off in groups and we were let go. We didn't see any temperature scanning, nobody was pulled aside that we could see. All passengers were told that they would need to self-isolate at home or in a hotel for 14 days. Now this is levels and levels of incompetency, the likes of which we scarcely get to see, but we do see all too regularly when it comes to government. So obviously the cruise ship, private company I'm assuming, has this log of infections on the sickness on the ship and this sort of thing. So previously on the first trip they had 158 and they took no action over that. Who knows how many cases of sickness they had on this trip. We know there were people exhibiting symptoms, there were people coughing and this sort of thing. And again, no action was taken because, maybe they just want to avoid flack or this sort of thing, but they're certainly copying it now. And again, once they get to Australia, it's crazy. It's not like the New South Wales government, the Australian government didn't know that this ship was coming. This isn't the age of sail anymore when you're subject to wind and that sort of thing. We're expecting the ship to turn up sometime this week and it might turn up in the middle of the night. No, things run on petrol, things run on fuel. We know precisely when these ships can arrive and we can track them by radar. So it's not like they didn't know the ship was coming. There's no plausible deniability there. And it's not like they're not aware that ships are an incubator for disease, because again, we have that case study over in Japan. And it's not like people are so stupid that they don't think that disease can circulate in ships and that sort of thing. We understand that that's how disease spreads from country to country, but again, no action taken, ship deemed low risk, and 2,700 passengers were allowed to disembark. So the next day, March 20, the New South Wales health authorities begin to scramble after the passengers after 4 who were exhibiting symptoms test positive for COVID-19. So COVID-19 was certainly on the ship. The health department said they began calling passengers, emailing and texting them to inform them of the confirmed cases and reminded them to self-isolate and monitor for symptoms. And this is what's so annoying about this response, because everyone gets off the ship and there's 2,700 people and they just scatter. They go interstate, they go all around Sydney, they go all around New South Wales, and you have to chase after them, and they're wandering around shedding the viral load potentially. All those people, all those potentially infected people were nicely clustered in one area on a cruise ship where you could easily corral them, because all you do is you just dock the ship offshore. No one's going to attempt to make that swim. No one in the right mind, at least. Mostly, people on the older side on cruise ships and that sort of thing. So they're not marathon swimmers. They're not going to make that swim. And you can have them all in one nice little spot, and you can just let them sit there for 2 weeks. You can even pay them, because the government's just turning on the fire hose with money right now. You can pay them. You get a few extra weeks holiday. Congratulations. And just wait for these symptoms to show themselves. Apparently that's didn't occur to them or something. And now we have to chase after these people after they've moved interstate and began shedding the viral load and this sort of thing. It's just the sheer level of incompetency is shocking, frankly. So on March 24, 4 days later, after they began to scramble after people, the number of confirmed cases linked to the Ruby Princess rises to 133, with 107 being in New South Wales and 26 being interstate. So that's a problem, because again, how did these people get interstate? Did they travel by bus? Did they travel by train? Did they go on another ship? Did they go through the airport, which is most likely? Airports are these incubators for this disease, because there's so many people moving around, moving all to different countries and places. It's a great place to spread that viral load. And again, the cruise ship failed, the state government failed to quarantine these people, and now 26 people potentially moving through airports, and it's just a fucking disaster. To top it all off, a woman in her 70s, one of the original 4 that tested positive for COVID-19, dies in hospital. So, that's probably not a preventable death, but who knows who else has been affected due to the incompetency of the New South Wales government. So now we're reading from SBS. March 27, so just today. A further 41 cases of COVID-19 are linked to the Ruby Princess, bringing the total number to 174, with 162 being of those in my state, New South Wales. And immediately and inevitably and disappointingly, what we see is the infighting begin between different government departments. So we have the Australian Border Control Force blaming the New South Wales Health Authority, saying, look, this is a health issue, you should have checked it out. We had the health authorities blaming the Border Control, saying, look, it's a border issue, people are coming into the country, you should have checked it out. There's no accountability, because they're all just sniping at one each other instead of, owning up to the bar and saying, look, we fucked up here, because that's just apparently not how the New South Wales government operates. It's not a system of accountability. Obviously, the Premier is being raked over the coals for it. Everyone's very disappointed in the New South Wales government for this, because this is a fucking disaster beyond comprehension. How do you get to the stage where we've been in sort of pandemic mode for months and months now? It's not been in the public eye for months and months, but we've been aware of this disease, this virus for ages, and we've had this heightened level of response, and we've watched what happened overseas, because Australia's, of course, takes a little longer to infect because we are an island rather than having open land borders in Europe. We can watch what's happening in Europe. We can watch what's happening in China. It's in the media, which by the time it's in the mainstream media, it's already too late. You're fucked. We've had widespread reporting on shortages and this sort of thing. How are we getting to the stage where all this has happened, and the New South Wales government looks at this cruise ship coming in, not for the first time either, for the second time, and they say, just let it go. And again, it's not like they didn't know it was turning up, because they can track it by radar. There's a million different ways they can track it. You understand? They knew the ship was arriving, and they did nothing. And these are the people, these are the fucking morons who are in charge of keeping you and your family and your friends safe. These are the people who look at a virus hotbed of a cruise ship, which is known to be a great incubator for this virus, which is really infectious. I mean, you're jamming all those people together, like thousands of people clustered in one area, basically one giant apartment block. They look at that and they say, let it in. Low risk. Low risk? Are you fucking kidding me? And, it's not going to help people's fear, because obviously people, if they have faith in the government response, they'll be more cooperative. But if they have no faith in the government response, they're not going to cooperate. They're not going to self-isolate because they're saying, look at these fucking jokers. They don't know what they're doing. Or they're going to say, I'm not going to do what the New South Wales government recommends me to do, even if it seems like a good idea, because look at these fucking idiots. They can't even manage the situation. This isn't a small bungle. The Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, comes out and said, we're deploying 500 police officers to make sure people self-isolate, and, we're going to issue on-the-spot fines for this sort of shit. The individual Australian is being hounded after by men with guns and being forced to pay fines if they go outside, which they shouldn't do. I'm not endorsing that. It's, silly to go outside when you should be self-isolating. You're endangering, everyone around you. But then on the same foot, they're letting in 2,700 people off a cruise ship, which is known to be an incubator for this disease, many of them who are showing symptoms, and then they're desperately trying to chase up these people and saying, by the way, 4 people tested positive, or 174 or whatever it was now, you might want to self-isolate for 14 days. That is beyond a joke, and we are paying these people involuntarily. I got my pay slip the other day, a portion of my income was taxed away, and it's to fund idiots like this who don't do their fucking job. And if they're doing their job, they're fucking half-assing it. And instead of owning up and barring up and saying, look, we fucked up, they're just blaming each other. So it's very disheartening to see that this was allowed to happen, and it's very disheartening to see that the response has been the blame game. But unfortunately, this is just the nature of government. It's not a meritocratic system, like a free market system. But even obviously, of course, this Ruby Princess cruise ship, keeping the logs of the diseases, and they're not telling people, because that would have an impact on its share prices, one would assume. So everyone's just fucking total lack of accountability, just disgusting behaviour here, whilst the ordinary Australian is abused by the police if he chooses to stupidly go outside. So it's bloody god awful to see. So yeah, this is important information to get out. The New South Wales government completely failed on this. This is a train wreck, a complete disaster when we're discussing coronavirus, and hopefully we can attempt to learn from this mistake and not trust the government, because they're not the most competent people around. Thanks all for sticking around, and have a good one.